I heard her giggle, a sound that sliced through me like a knife. "Your wife is so dumb, baby," she whispered, "thinking you're alone, missing her." But I wasn't missing. I was right there under our bed, my phone recording every single word, every sick laugh. Welcome to Aunt Me's Fireside Stories. I am very happy to have you here. Before we move on, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and listen to the entire story carefully. At the end of the video, share your opinion in the comments on how you would handle such a situation. And now let's get back to my story. It all started 5 years ago when I married Mark. I was Sarah, a young woman with a heart full of dreams and a belief in true love. Mark was everything I thought I ever wanted. He was kind, charming, and he made me laugh until my stomach hurt. We met through mutual friends, and from our very first date, I felt a connection I had never experienced before. He looked at me like I was the only woman in the world, and for a long time I believed I was. Our wedding day, 5 October 2018, was the happiest day of my life. I wore a simple white dress, and Mark, in his smart suit, had tears in his eyes as I walked down the aisle. I truly believed we would spend the rest of our lives together, growing old, sharing everything. We bought a small house soon after. It wasn't grand, but it was ours, a blank canvas for our future. I worked diligently as a paralegal assistant, saving every dollar I could. My salary, along with Mark's good income from his marketing job, slowly transformed that house into a home filled with love and warmth. I spent hours decorating, choosing furniture, and planting flowers in the small garden. I believed in making a sanctuary, a place where we could both relax and be ourselves. Mark would often tell me how much he appreciated my hard work, how lucky he was to have me. These words filled me with pride and reinforced my trust in our bond. For the first 3 years of our marriage, our life was a beautiful, predictable rhythm of happiness. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our special evenings watching movies or cooking together. We talked about our future, about having 2 children, a boy and a girl. I loved him with all my heart, and I believed he loved me back just as fiercely. Then, about 10 months ago, things began to shift. Our life had become busier, and I found myself struggling to keep up with both my job and the house chores. Mark suggested we hire some help. That's when Maria entered our lives. She was recommended by a friend, described as quiet, efficient, and trustworthy. Maria was young, probably 23 years old, with big, innocent eyes and a soft voice. She seemed very respectful, always saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. I felt a sense of relief, thinking she would light my load and allow me more time to spend with Mark. I trusted her completely, leaving her alone in our house, sharing details about our routines, even our pantry items. I treated her kindly, sometimes even leaving her extra food or giving her small bonuses. I thought I was being a good employer, a fair and generous person. Little did I know, this kindness would be thrown back in my face with a cruel twist. The changes started subtly, like a slow drip, barely noticeable at first. Mark began staying out late more often. He would call, sometimes at 7:00 p.m., sometimes at 8:00 p.m., saying, "I'm stuck at work, Sarah, a big project." He sounded tired, but his explanations started to feel thin, stretched. When he came home, sometimes past 11:00 p.m., he would often go straight to the shower, claiming he was sweaty from a long day. His eyes, once so open and honest with me, started to avoid mine. He would glance away when I asked about his day or offer short, vague answers. His phone became an extension of his hand. He took calls in the next room, always with a lowered voice. He would text constantly, his thumbs flying across the screen, a small, secretive smile playing on his lips. If I dared to ask who he was talking to, he would snap, "It's work, Sarah. Stop being so nosy. Don't you trust me?" His anger flared quickly now, turning small questions into big arguments. The physical distance grew too. There were no more good morning kisses, no more casual touches as we passed each other in the hall. Our bed, once a warm sanctuary, started to feel cold and empty, even when he was lying next to me. I would reach for his hand in my sleep, only to find him turned away, a silent wall between us. Small things would infuriate him. "Why is dinner not ready exactly at 7:00 p.m.?" he would ask, even if I was 5 minutes late. "You always complain, Sarah. Can't you just be happy?" he once yelled when I gently told him I missed our old closeness. My 30th birthday arrived on 12 June, and he completely forgot. He didn't even wish me. It wasn't until 2 days later, when I was quietly wiping away tears in the kitchen, that he seemed to realize. He came home with a cheap bouquet of roses, looking apologetic, but the damage was done. It felt like a deep cut. He said, "I'm so sorry, baby, work has been crazy." But the words felt hollow. Then there were the inexplicable things. I found a fancy women's watch in the glove compartment of his car one day when I was looking for my sunglasses. It was a delicate, expensive-looking silver watch. My heart pounded. I asked him about it later, trying to keep my voice calm. He quickly said, "Oh, it's for my sister Clara. Her birthday is coming up." But Clara's birthday was 6 months away in January. I pretended to believe him, but a cold knot formed in my stomach. A few weeks later, I smelled a new perfume on his shirts. It wasn't mine, not Maria's cheap floral scent. This was something expensive, musky, and distinctly feminine. It clung to his collars, a silent accusation. I started checking his clothes, sniffing them before I put them in the wash, a degrading act for a wife, but I couldn't stop myself. Maria's behavior also changed, evolving from respectful to overtly familiar. She started taking liberties, using my expensive facial cleanser as if it were hers, or leaving a damp towel on my side of the bed. I once found her wearing one of my favorite silk scarves, a precious gift from my grandmother. When I asked her, her face barely registered surprise. She just shrugged and said, "It was on the chair. I thought it was old, Mrs. Sarah." The disrespect was palpable. She started dressing differently for work, too. More revealing clothes, brighter makeup, not something you'd expect a maid to wear while scrubbing floors. She would giggle loudly at Mark's jokes, far more than necessary, and would linger in the room whenever he was present. I'd walk into the kitchen and find them leaning close, whispering, only to jump apart guiltily when they saw me. They'd pretend to be discussing household chores, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. One afternoon, I came home early from work, feeling unwell with a sudden migraine. The house was supposed to be empty except for Maria, who was scheduled to clean that day. As I slowly climbed the stairs, a wave of nausea hitting me, I heard laughter coming from our bedroom. A man's hearty laugh, unmistakably Mark's, followed by Maria's high-pitched giggle. My blood ran cold. I froze at the top of the stairs, my heart starting to race, the migraine forgotten for a moment. Slowly, quietly, I walked towards the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open just enough to peer inside. Maria was in our bedroom, folding Mark's shirts, holding one up to her face, sniffing it. Mark was sitting on the edge of our bed, our marital bed, laughing loudly at something she had just said. He was shirtless, his muscular back to me. When he saw me in the doorway, his laughter died immediately and his face went pale. He quickly grabbed a shirt and pulled it on. Maria, who had been looking at Mark with an adoring expression, turned to me, her eyes wide, then quickly looked away, a strange, knowing smirk playing on her lips before she composed herself. "Just helping Mr. Mark with his laundry," she said, her voice a little too quick, a little too innocent. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a lie hanging heavy between us. My gut screamed. Something was very, very wrong. I felt a deep dread, a cold fear settling in my stomach. I wanted to confront them, to scream, but the words caught in my throat. I just nodded, pretending to believe Maria, and mumbled, "I'm not feeling well. I'm going to lie down." I walked past them, feeling their eyes on my back, and went into the guest room, locking the door behind me. I lay there, listening to their hushed whispers from down the hall, tears silently streaming down my face. My perfect life, my perfect marriage was crumbling before my eyes. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The image of Mark shirtless on our bed, laughing with Maria, haunted me. The way she had looked at him, the way he had quickly covered himself, it all screamed betrayal. The suspicion had been a quiet whisper before, but now it was a deafening roar. I knew deep down that something was happening, something terrible. But I needed proof. I needed undeniable evidence, not just for myself, but for anyone who might doubt me. I knew Mark would deny it vehemently, turn it all around on me, make me seem like the crazy, jealous wife. I needed to catch them red-handed. The thought filled me with a sickening mixture of dread and grim determination. I spent sleepless nights pacing our guest room, plotting. I felt like a detective in my own home, a stranger in my own life. Then, an idea, cold and calculating, began to form in my mind. A plan that was risky, that required me to become someone I wasn't, to lie to the man I loved. I decided to tell Mark I was going to my village, 6 hours away, to visit my aunt, who I claimed was suddenly very sick. I made a big show of packing, pulling out my largest suitcase, filling it with clothes, toiletries, and even a few books I had been meaning to read. I wanted it to look convincing. "My poor Aunt Clara," I told Mark one evening, forcing a sad expression. "She's not doing well. I think I need to go stay with her for a week just to help out." Mark looked surprised, then almost relieved. He put on a show of concern, of course. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. Please go, take care of her. I'll be fine here." He even hugged me, a hug that felt distant and forced, but I clung to it, trying to gauge his reaction. His eyes, though, were already sparkling with something else, something I couldn't quite decipher, but it made my stomach churn. The next morning, 18 September, I woke up early, feigning sadness. I gave Mark a quick kiss goodbye, picked up my heavy suitcase, and drove off at 6:00 a.m., making sure he saw me leave. My heart was pounding, a strange mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through me. I drove for about 3 hours, enough distance to make it seem like I was well on my way to my village. Then I pulled into a discreet, cheap motel parking lot in a small town. I booked a room for one night, just in case Mark decided to check my location or call a relative to confirm I had arrived. I paid cash, avoiding any digital traces. I spent the afternoon in that motel room preparing. I made sure my phone was fully charged, silent, and ready to record both audio and video. I also set up a private family group chat, including my parents, my siblings, Mark's parents, and his sister, Clara. I wouldn't activate the live stream until the exact, agonizing moment. I packed a small bag with only the essentials, a bottle of water, a few protein bars, and a portable charger. I knew I might be in for a long wait. As night fell around 8:00 p.m., I drove back towards our city. I parked my car 3 streets away from our house, a quiet, tree-lined street where my car would be hidden under the thick foliage of a large oak. The darkness was my ally. I took a deep breath, clutching my small bag, and walked silently towards our home. The house was dark, a silent silhouette against the streetlights. Using my spare key, which I always kept hidden under a loose brick near the back door, I slipped inside. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy with unspoken secrets. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, seemed magnified. I moved like a ghost, tiptoeing past the living room, past the kitchen, and straight towards our bedroom. I lifted the heavy bed skirt that adorned our king-sized bed. Beneath it, a tight but sufficient space. I had chosen this bed specifically because it sat high enough off the floor to accommodate storage boxes, and as it turned out I slid silently onto my stomach, pulling the bed skirt back down, plunging myself into complete darkness. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of old wood. I made sure my phone was ready, its screen dark, but the recording function just a tap away. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the silence. I was scared, utterly terrified, but also fueled by a desperate need for the truth. I lay there, motionless, listening to the deafening silence of the house for what felt like an eternity. 3 long hours passed. Every minute was a battle against my own nerves, against the growing chill in the air, against the fear that I might be wrong, that I was just a paranoid wife. But then a small voice inside me reminded me of the watch, the perfume, the changed smiles, the hushed whispers. No, I wasn't paranoid. I was just about to be proven right in the most painful way imaginable. Around 11:30 p.m. I heard it, the faint click of the front door opening. My body tensed, every muscle coiling tight. I heard Mark's voice, low and muffled. He was talking to someone. My breath hitched in my throat. Then I heard a light, high-pitched giggle, Maria's giggle. My blood ran cold, turning to ice in my veins. They walked through the living room, their footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floor, then into the kitchen. I heard the clinking of glasses, the murmur of their voices, too low for me to make out words, but the tone was intimate, familiar. They were drinking together, in my house. The footsteps grew louder, closer. They were approaching the bedroom. My bedroom, our bedroom. My phone was gripped tight in my trembling hand. I pressed the record button. The door opened, flooding the space under the bed with a brief sliver of light from the hallway, then it clicked shut, plunging me back into darkness, but now a darkness that contained them. I could hear their breathing close by. The room filled with the sweet, cloying scent of Maria's cheap perfume, now mixed with Mark's cologne. Finally, I heard Mark sigh, his voice heavy with what sounded like relief. She thinks I'm alone, sleeping soundly. She's in her village miles away, visiting her sick aunt. She's so predictable. He chuckled, a cruel, mocking sound that ripped through my heart. Always the dutiful wife. Maria giggled again, that same infuriating sound. Your wife is so dumb, baby, she whispered, her voice laced with venom, a stark contrast to the innocent girl I had hired. Thinking you're alone, missing her. She has no idea what happens here. I felt a surge of rage so intense it almost made me cry out. Dumb, predictable. I was lying right beneath them, witnessing their betrayal firsthand. Every word was a knife twisting in my gut. I heard the rustle of clothes, the soft thud of shoes hitting the floor. Then the distinct sound of the bed creaking as they both got onto it. My bed. The very bed where Mark and I had shared our most intimate moments, where we had dreamed of a future together. So my sweet Maria, Mark whispered, his voice now dangerously soft. What mischief shall we get into tonight? Maria giggled again. Anything you want, Mr. Mark, anything at all. Now that the old hag is gone, we can be ourselves, no more hiding. Old hag, that's what she called me. The woman who had given her a job, who had treated her with kindness and trust. The words stung more than any physical blow. She always was too serious, Mark continued, his voice laced with disdain. Always worried about bills, about the house, about her silly little job. Never relaxed. You, Maria, you understand me. You know how to make me laugh, how to forget all that boring stuff. Maria purred. Of course, baby, I always have, and I know what you really like. I heard the distinct sound of a zipper being pulled down, then fabric rustling to the floor. My stomach churned. I had to fight the urge to throw up right there under the bed. I focused on the recording, making sure my phone was perfectly still. Every word, every sound was being captured. I can't believe we pulled this off, Maria said, a triumphant note in her voice. That stupid fake illness story. She fell for it hook, line, and sinker. She's too trusting, Mark replied, his voice closer now as if he was leaning down. Always has been. It makes her easy to fool. Remember when I told her that watch was for Clara? She believed me. He laughed again, a harsh, ugly sound that I barely recognized as coming from my husband. She's so naive. I've been seeing you for 6 months now, Maria. She never suspected a thing. 6 months. 6 months of lies, of secret glances, of stolen moments in my own home. My world fractured into a million pieces. The pain was physical, a sharp, piercing ache in my chest. I had given this man my everything, my heart, my trust, my youth, and he had repaid me with this. With disgust, with lies, with another woman, a woman I had welcomed into our home. And she thinks I'm poor, just a maid, Maria sneered. She doesn't know about the money you've been giving me, does she? The $500 every month, for my family emergency, as you told her. My blood ran cold. $500 every month. Mark had always told me we needed to be careful with money, that we were saving for our future. He had always complained about my small expenses. And all this time, he was giving Maria my money, our money, for family emergencies that were clearly just a cover for his affair. This wasn't just betrayal, it was financial abuse. She doesn't need to know anything, my love, Mark said, his voice husky. She's just a placeholder. You're the one I want, the one who truly understands me. When are you going to leave her? Maria asked, her voice turning insistent. You promised, baby. You said once she was out of the picture, you'd be free. You'd be mine. Soon, Mark mumbled. It's complicated. The divorce will be messy. She's got her claws in deep, but I'll handle it. Don't you worry. We'll be together, Maria. You and I will sell this house, get a new one, a house where we can be free. Sell our house, the house I had painstakingly turned into a home, the house we had planned to raise our children in. He was planning to discard me, to throw me out, and bring his mistress into my life, into my future. The audacity, the cruelty, was beyond anything I could have imagined. I clenched my teeth, tears silently pouring down my face, soaking the dusty floor beneath me. The rage had now completely eclipsed the pain. I was no longer just a heartbroken wife. I was a woman scorned, a woman betrayed, and I was about to make them pay. I reached for my phone again, my fingers shaking. The recording was still running. I found the family group chat icon, the one I had set up earlier. With a grim determination, I tapped the live stream button. Are you sure you want to go live to this group? The phone asked. I pressed yes. Within seconds, a message would have popped up on the phones of my parents, his parents, my siblings, and his sister. Sarah is now live. They would see everything, hear everything. The truth, raw and ugly, was about to be laid bare for everyone to witness. I could hear their hushed voices above me, their movements. They were too absorbed in their sickening intimacy to notice the faint vibration of my phone, the subtle shift in the air. This was it, the moment of truth. The moment I had been planning for, dreading, and now finally craving. I took a deep, shuddering breath. "Enjoying yourselves?" I asked, my voice cutting through the intimate silence, surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my entire body. I pushed the bed skirt up with a violent shove and slowly, deliberately, slid out from under the bed. The sudden movement, the sound of my voice, froze them both. Mark stiffened, his head snapping up. Maria gasped, a small, choked sound. They both stared at me, their faces contorted in a mixture of disbelief and horror. Mark's eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open. Maria, caught in the act, looked like a deer in headlights, her mascara smudged from their activities, her hair disheveled. "Sarah," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible, laced with utter shock. What are you doing here?" "You're supposed to be in the village." I stood up fully, my back straight, my gaze burning into theirs. I held my phone up, its screen still displaying the live stream, still recording. "Surprise, Mark," I said, my voice cold, devoid of any warmth. "I decided my aunt wasn't sick enough. I decided to come home. And what a homecoming it has been." Maria, finally finding her voice, screeched, "Mrs. Sarah, this is a misunderstanding. I was just..." Her eyes darted to Mark, pleading. "Up, Maria," I cut her off, my voice like steel. "Your lies are over, both of you. Every single word you've uttered, every disgusting laugh, every cruel insult, every plan you've made to discard me and take my home. It's all recorded, and not just for me." I gestured to my phone. "Our entire family is watching this live right now. Your parents, Mark, my parents, everyone." Mark's face drained of all color. He looked from me to the phone, then to Maria, then back to me, his jaw slack. He looked utterly defeated, utterly exposed. Maria started to tremble, her face turning ashen. The weight of their betrayal, the sheer audacity of their actions, was finally crashing down on them. The silence in the room was deafening, thick with shame and disbelief. I just stood there, watching them, feeling a grim satisfaction mix with the searing pain in my heart. The game was over. The game was over. The silence that followed was a living thing, heavy and oppressive, pressing down on our chests, making the simple act of breathing feel like a struggle. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the presence of every unspoken truth, every festering lie, every shattered piece of trust that now filled the air. It felt thick, almost viscous, like liquid glass poured around us, solidifying each person in their moment of raw exposure. My ears, usually quick to pick up the gentle crackle of the fireplace or the distant hum of traffic from the street outside, heard nothing but the frantic thumping of my own heart against my ribs, a drumbeat of sorrow and indignation. The air itself seemed to grow colder, even with the warm glow from the hearth casting dancing shadows on the walls. The familiar, comforting scent of burning logs and old tea leaves that usually filled my living room was now overshadowed by a faint, metallic tang, like fear or perhaps the bitter taste of betrayal itself. Every single dust motes, caught in the slivers of weak winter sun peeking through the lace curtains, seemed to hang suspended, unwilling to stir, as if the very atoms of the room were holding their breath. This wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the silence of a bomb about to detonate, a space stretched taut and brittle, ready to shatter into a million jagged pieces at the slightest sound, at the softest whisper. It was the sound of a world ending, not with a bang, but with a profound, aching quiet. Mark's face, which had been so quick to twist into smiles and feigned concern for 5 years, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. His eyes, usually sparkling with an easy charm, darted around the room like trapped birds, never quite landing on mine, refusing to meet the gaze that held the full weight of 82 years of life experience and a lifetime of hard-earned wisdom. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, catching the firelight, tracing a path through his carefully styled hair. His jaw, which had been so eloquent in spinning tales of woe and promises of future repayment, now hung slack, a useless hinge of bone and muscle. He seemed to shrink, physically, before my very eyes, his broad shoulders slumping, his usually confident posture dissolving into a pathetic hunch. He looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, but the cookies here were my life savings, my trust, and my very home. He made small, involuntary movements with his hands, clenching and unclenching his fists, as if trying to grasp at something that wasn't there, some phantom excuse or escape route. He started to open his mouth, a faint, dry click audible in the awful silence, but no words came out. It was just a weak, rasping sound like air escaping a punctured tire. Maria, beside him, was no less devastated, though her reaction was more outwardly expressive as always. Her hands flew to her mouth, not in a gesture of horror for her actions, but seemingly for the horror of being discovered. Her usually vibrant pink lipstick seemed a stark, painted slash against her now ashen skin. Her whole body trembled, a nervous tic starting in her left eyelid that made it flutter uncontrollably. Tears welled up in her eyes, not soft, gentle tears, but large, glittering drops that threatened to overflow, clinging to her long eyelashes. I couldn't tell if they were tears of genuine remorse or simply tears of frustration and self-pity, the bitter sting of a meticulously planned scheme unraveling right before her eyes. She swayed slightly, her knees looking weak, as if the very ground beneath her was giving way. She too tried to speak, her voice a thin, reedy whisper that cracked before forming a full word. "Aunt," she stammered, her voice catching in her throat, the sound like dry leaves rustling in a desolate wind. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, a silent sentinel amidst the ruins of my family. My heart ached, a deep, bruising pain that felt like a physical wound. It wasn't just the monetary loss, the thousands of dollars they had siphoned from my bank account, or the betrayal of my home. It was the deeper cut, the way they had systematically dismantled my faith in them, in the very idea of family loyalty. A grim satisfaction, cold and sharp as a winter morning, pricked at the edges of my pain. They had been caught. The intricate web of lies they had spun, so carefully woven over 5 years, had finally snagged on the sharp hook of truth. But this satisfaction was hollow, a fleeting moment of victory quickly overshadowed by the profound sorrow of what it meant. My throat felt tight, dry as sandpaper, making it hard to swallow, hard to breathe. I could feel the coldness of the floorboards seeping through my slippers, a subtle chill that mirrored the icy feeling spreading through my chest. Finally, the dam broke. "How could you?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, though it felt distant, as if someone else was speaking. Each word was carefully placed, like stones laid on a fragile bridge. "How could you do this to me, to your own family?" Mark flinched, as if struck. "Aunt Me, please, let me explain," he managed to choke out, his voice hoarse, a desperate plea layered with an undertone of residual entitlement. He took a tentative step towards me, his hands still twitching. "It's not what it seems. We were going to tell you." Maria nodded vigorously, the tears finally overflowing, streaming down her cheeks, leaving glistening tracks on her pale skin. "Yes, Aunt Me, we swear. It was just we were in such a desperate situation. We had nowhere else to turn. We thought we could get back on our feet, pay you back, and then confess everything. We just needed a little more time." She wrung her hands, her gaze flitting between me and Mark, seeking a shared narrative, a united front, even in their defeat. Their words, instead of softening the blow, only sharpened the edge of my anger. "Desperate situation," I repeated, my voice rising slightly, the carefully constructed calm starting to crack. "For 5 years, you have been in a desperate situation, Mark. For 5 years, you have come to me with a new story, a new crisis, a new reason why you needed another loan. A medical bill for one of the children, a car repair, overdue rent, a chance at a once-in-a-lifetime business venture. Each time I listened, I worried and I gave. Because that's what family does, isn't it? That's what a loving great-aunt does." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over them, holding each of them captive in turn. "And Maria," I continued, turning my full attention to her, "you, my dear, were always there, nodding, supporting his stories, adding your own tearful pleas. You never once questioned his need for the money. You never once suggested finding a job, finding a different way. You simply helped him spin the web tighter, didn't you?" Maria's face crumpled further. "Aunt Me, that's not fair. I tried to work, but with 3 children, it's so hard. And Mark, he works so hard, but things just kept going wrong. We never meant to hurt you." She dabbed at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup slightly. Her voice was thin, trying to project innocence, but it was edged with a defensive whine. This was a classic tactic, I realized, even in this moment of reckoning. Shift the blame, play the victim, minimize the impact of their actions. This was another specific incident of their ongoing disrespect, believing even now that I would be swayed by crocodile tears and half-hearted excuses. "Not fair," I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It was a dry, humorless sound that felt foreign in my own ears. You talk about fairness while you've been systematically draining my life savings for 5 years. You talk about fairness while you were living under my roof, eating my food, enjoying the warmth of my fire, all while secretly buying a house with my money and planning to wait for my death to take this house from me. The last sentence hung in the air, a stark, brutal accusation. Mark gasped, a short, sharp intake of breath, and Maria's trembling intensified, her face a ghastly shade of green. The sheer audacity of their long-term plan, revealed so casually in my words, seemed to finally penetrate their self-absorption. A house, not a small cottage, but a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a 2-car garage on a 0.5-acre lot, purchased for $450,000 in cash, using the money I painstakingly saved over 60 years of work. Money I intended to leave to all my nieces and nephews, equally, as an inheritance. Money I hoped would provide for my own care in my declining years should I need it. My voice was louder now, carrying the full weight of my indignation. You didn't just borrow money, you stole my future. You gambled with my security, my peace of mind, all while putting on a show of love and concern. Mark finally found his voice, a desperate, pleading tone. No, Aunt Mee, you don't understand. The house was an investment. We thought we could rent it out, make some money, and then pay you back all at once. We were going to surprise you with the news that we were finally financially stable. We wanted to make you proud. His words tumbled out, rushed and illogical, a frantic attempt to reframe their predatory actions as misguided benevolence. He even managed to conjure a flicker of hurt in his eyes, as if I was the one being unfair, not him. This was another clear instance of disrespect, trying to manipulate my emotions even when faced with undeniable proof. An investment, with my money. Without my knowledge or permission, I scoffed, the sound sharp and disbelieving. And you planned to surprise me by revealing you'd bought a property with every penny you'd extracted from me, while continuing to live here pretending to be struggling. What kind of surprise is that, Mark? The kind that reveals you've been living a double life, a deceitful charade for years. I walked slowly towards the ornate mantelpiece, my fingers tracing the familiar, smooth wood. The old grandfather clock in the corner, usually a comforting presence with its steady tick-tock, seemed to mock their silence. Its pendulum swung back and forth, a relentless reminder of the 5 years they had stolen from my peace. You needed $5,000 for little Tommy's braces in January 2021. I gave it to you. You needed $10,000 for an urgent car repair in June 2021 because you couldn't get to work without it. I gave it to you. Another $15,000 for medical bills in September 2022, then $20,000 for a down payment on a small business venture in April 2023. These were just some of the larger sums, Mark. Do you know how many times you came to me for $500 or $1,000 for groceries or utility bills that never seemed to get paid? I turned back to them, my eyes burning. Do you know how many times I sacrificed my own comfort, my own small luxuries to help you? I stopped going to my weekly bridge games because the bus fare seemed like an unnecessary expense when you needed food. I cut down on my own heating in the winter, just to make sure I had enough to loan you when you asked. I even sold some of my grandmother's old jewelry, pieces I cherished, to help you with that urgent roof repair you said you needed last year. And all the while, you were accumulating a substantial down payment, then the full purchase price for a property that was yours. My voice was laced with an emotion I rarely allowed myself to feel, pure, undiluted fury. Maria, seeing her husband falter, stepped forward, her voice a little stronger now, desperation giving way to a more aggressive defensive posture. Aunt Mee, you make it sound like we were living extravagantly. We were struggling. We chose to put our money into an asset, a home, because we wanted stability for our children. You can't fault us for wanting a better life for our kids. Her tone implied that I, by questioning their actions, was somehow standing in the way of their children's well-being. This was a particularly cruel and manipulative form of disrespect, using the children as a shield for their dishonesty. A better life, I scoffed again, a sharp, bitter sound. A better life built on lies and deceit. A better life paid for with an elderly woman's savings. You think that's a foundation for a better life, Maria? What kind of example are you setting for those 3 children you claim to love so much? that it's acceptable to lie, to manipulate, to steal from family, as long as you get what you want. My words seemed to hit her harder than anything said so far. She recoiled, her face flushing a deep red, a mixture of shame and indignation warring for dominance. Mark, however, suddenly found a renewed burst of bravado, fueled perhaps by the shame of Maria's exposure and the need to defend his own fragile pride. "We weren't stealing, Aunt Me. You gave us the money you offered, and we told you we'd pay you back." His voice was loud now, almost accusatory, trying to shift the narrative from their betrayal to my supposed willingness. He pointed a finger at me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You can't just take back what you've given." This was the ultimate escalation of disrespect. To frame my generosity as a weakness, my attempt to help as an invitation to exploit, and then to claim entitlement to the stolen funds. "Gave you the money," I repeated, my voice now dangerously quiet, a stark contrast to his rising volume. "I gave you the money because you spun tales of hardship, Mark. I gave you the money because you swore on your children's lives that you were in dire straits. I gave you the money out of love, out of a sense of family duty, not because I was simply handing out free cash to fund your secret property empire." I took a deep, shaky breath, the pain in my chest radiating outwards. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think it brings me any joy to see my grandnephew, whom I helped raise, standing before me, defending such a heinous betrayal?" My voice cracked slightly on the last word, the raw emotion finally breaking through my carefully maintained composure. The tears, which I had so bravely held back, now pricked at my eyes, blurring the outlines of their guilt-ridden faces. I blinked them away, refusing to let them see my full vulnerability. "The phone call you just overheard, Mark," I continued, my voice regaining its steel, "was from my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He confirmed what I already suspected after weeks of quiet investigation. He confirmed the purchase of the house at 1789 Oakwood Lane on Oct. 12, 2023, for $450,000, paid in full, under Maria's maiden name, with you as a co-owner. He also confirmed that this purchase coincided exactly with the period you received the largest loans from me, totaling over $400,000 in the last 18 months alone. And he confirmed your plan to delay registering this house, my house, your great-aunt's house, in your name until after my passing, citing concerns about inheritance tax implications. Do you deny any of that?" The precise details, the names, the dates, the amounts, spoken with such calm authority, seemed to hit them like a physical blow. Mark's defiance drained away once more, replaced by that same defeated, utterly exposed look. Maria visibly wilted, her face buried in her hands, her sobs now more genuine, laced with the sharp sting of being caught red-handed, with no plausible deniability left. "So the game is indeed over," I stated, my voice firm, allowing no room for further argument or manipulation. The pain was still there, a dull throb in my heart, but it was now overlaid with a steely resolve. I had spent too many years being gentle, too many years making excuses for them. No more. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, my voice cutting through Maria's muffled sobs and Mark's ragged breathing. I walked over to the antique writing desk near the window, pulling out a crisp white envelope that I had prepared earlier that morning, my hands surprisingly steady. The old wood felt smooth and cool beneath my fingertips. "You have exactly 24 hours to vacate my home. That means by 6:00 p.m. tomorrow, 23 January 2025, every single one of your belongings and those of your children must be out of this house." Mark's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Aunt Me, you can't be serious. Where are we supposed to go? We have 3 children, it's winter." His voice rose in a frantic, desperate crescendo, once again attempting to use the children as leverage, another manipulative tactic. "You have a 4-bedroom house on Oakwood Lane, Mark," I reminded him, my voice devoid of emotion. "A house you purchased with my money, a house that should now be perfectly capable of accommodating your family of 5. You have a roof over your head, a luxury you claimed not to have for 5 years. I tapped the envelope in my hand. "In this envelope is a letter from Mr. Henderson. It outlines the full extent of my intent to recover every single dollar you have taken from me with interest. It details the legal actions I will be taking to ensure that not only is the money returned, but also that you are held accountable for your fraudulent actions." Maria lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen, but now a spark of something uglier, more defiant, flashed within them. "You're suing us, your own family. After everything you've done for us, you're going to throw us out into the cold and then take everything from us." Her voice was shrill, high-pitched, a wounded animal's cry, laced with a sense of entitlement that truly baffled me. She genuinely believed she was the victim here. This was perhaps the most shocking incident of disrespect, yet the complete reversal of blame, the total lack of self-awareness even after being caught unequivocally. "Everything you've done for me," I asked, a bitter laugh escaping me again. "You mean the elaborate charade of affection, the constant stream of fabricated emergencies? Years of living a lie at my expense? No, Maria, this is what you have done to me. This is the consequence of your choices, of your greed, of your profound lack of respect for me, for your family, and for the very concept of honesty." I walked directly towards them, stopping a few feet away, my eyes locked on Mark's. "I'm not taking everything from you, Mark. I am simply reclaiming what is rightfully mine. The money you stole, the peace of mind you shattered. And yes, you will be leaving my home. Immediately." My tone was absolute, unyielding. There would be no more negotiation, no more second chances, no more softening the blow. Mark tried one last, desperate attempt at manipulation. "Aunt Me, please, think of the children. They love it here. This is their home. How can you separate them from their great aunt?" He gestured vaguely around the familiar living room, trying to evoke a sense of sentimental attachment, hoping to pull at my heartstrings. He even tried to feign a protective stance, as if he was defending them from my cruelty. This was another deeply disrespectful move, to weaponize the innocent children and try to make me feel like the villain. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, heavy and sudden. The fight had drained me, but I couldn't give in now. "The children will be with their parents, in the house their parents chose to buy," I stated, my voice flat. "And as for loving it here, Mark, perhaps you should have thought about the consequences of your actions before you decided to build your own future on a foundation of lies and theft from the very person you claim to love. The choices you made have created this outcome, not mine. I am merely reacting to the painful truth you forced upon me." I held out the envelope, letting it hover between us. Mark hesitated, his hand shaking slightly as he reached out and took it. His fingers brushed against mine, and for a fleeting moment I felt a flicker of the old affection, the warmth of a bond that was now irrevocably broken. But it was quickly replaced by a cold, hollow sensation. The weight of his betrayal was too heavy to ever overlook. "You have 24 hours, I repeated, my gaze unwavering. "I will be having the locks changed at 6:00 p.m. tomorrow. Do not attempt to contact me after you leave. All future communication will be handled through Mr. Henderson." Maria let out a fresh wail, a sound of utter despair and fury. "This is insane. You're ruining our lives, our children's lives," she shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly in the now silent room, shattering the fragile peace that had settled after my pronouncements. She stamped her foot, acting like a petulant child denied a toy, not a 40-year-old woman facing the consequences of her profound dishonesty. Her rage, I realized, was not directed at their own actions, but at my resolve, at the unexpected strength I had found to stand up to their deceit. This raw display of anger, this absolute lack of remorse even now, confirmed to me that I was doing the right thing. There was no redeeming them, no path to reconciliation when they viewed themselves as the victims. "No, Maria," I said, my voice weary but firm, "you ruined your own lives. I merely stopped you from ruining mine." I turned my back on them, walking towards the hallway, my steps slow but deliberate. Every fiber of my being wanted to collapse, to weep, to scream at the injustice and the pain. But I wouldn't. Not now, not in front of them. My great-nephew and his wife stood frozen, watching me walk away, the reality of my words finally beginning to sink in. The faint scent of wood smoke still lingered in the air, but now it felt tainted, no longer a symbol of warmth and comfort, but a reminder of the ashes of trust. As I reached the foot of the stairs, I heard Maria's voice, weaker now, laced with a desperate plea that was too little, too late. "Aunt Me, please, don't do this." I didn't turn around. There was nothing left to say. The game was truly over, and the consequences, however painful, were now set in motion. I walked up the stairs, each step heavy, each step carrying the weight of 5 years of lies, and the crushing burden of a family broken beyond repair. My hand reached for the banister, the smooth, cool wood a small comfort. The light from the living room dimmed behind me, casting long, stark shadows up the stairwell, as if the darkness was already beginning to consume the space they were about to vacate. I could still hear the faint sound of Maria's continued, desperate sobs and Mark's hushed, frantic whispers, a cacophony of defeat echoing in the home that would soon be mine, and mine alone once more. Thank you for joining me for this difficult story tonight. Sometimes, the hardest stories are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves and about the true meaning of family. Until next time, please take care of your hearts and each other. Like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Every day, I felt that resonance, that deep ache that comes from a life lived fully, but also from a life where patience was stretched thinner than a worn-out bedsheet. My home, once a sanctuary filled with the soft hum of contentment and the comforting scent of baking bread, began to change. It wasn't an overnight shift. It was a slow, creeping frost that settled into the corners of rooms, chilling the air, making the floorboards creak with a different kind of tension. I remember one crisp morning. It was around 7:30 a.m. The sun was just starting to spill golden light over the kitchen counter, warming the smooth, cool granite. I was carefully measuring out coffee grounds, 6 scoops precisely, for my morning brew, the rich, earthy aroma already starting to unfurl in the quiet space. Suddenly, a jarring clang erupted from the living room. My hands, usually so steady, flinched, causing a tiny cascade of dark grounds to scatter across the clean counter. I sighed, a little puff of air that felt heavy with unspoken weariness. It was my grandnephew, Thomas, 17 years old, home from school on a sick day that felt suspiciously like a day dedicated to video games. He had carelessly dropped his backpack, filled with heavy textbooks and a clanging lunchbox, right onto the antique wooden chest I inherited from my grandmother. A beautiful piece, hand-carved with delicate roses, something I cherished deeply. I walked into the living room, trying to keep my voice even despite the tremor of annoyance that tightened my throat. Thomas was sprawled on the sofa, his eyes glued to the bright screen of his phone, thumbs flying across the keyboard. He didn't even look up as I entered. "Thomas," I started, my voice a little softer than I intended, hoping to invite, not demand, attention. "Could you please be more careful with your things? That chest is very old and fragile." He grunted, a sound that lacked any discernible emotion, certainly not apology or recognition. His gaze remained fixed on the glowing rectangle in his hands. A faint, almost imperceptible smudge, like a faint bruise, marked the polished surface of the chest where his bag had fallen. It was small, barely visible, but to me, it was a glaring wound on something precious. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant chirping of sparrows outside suddenly felt loud in the silence that stretched between us. It was a silence filled with his indifference, a thick, suffocating blanket that seemed to absorb any warmth or connection. I stood there for a full 15 seconds, watching the top of his head, the way his hair fell over his ears. He never looked up. The air felt heavy, stagnant, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out, leaving behind only the residue of unmet expectations and a growing sense of being unheard. The faint scent of stale energy drink and adolescent sweat hung in the air around him, clashing sharply with the clean, lemon-scented polish I had used on the chest just the day before. The room, usually so bright and welcoming, felt shadowed, muted, reflecting the dimness that had settled over my spirit. That incident, though small, was a tiny stone dropped into the calm pool of my home, sending out ripples that grew wider with each passing day. The disrespect wasn't always a shout or a slammed door. Sometimes, it was this quiet, insidious kind of neglect, a complete disregard for my presence, my feelings, my home. It was like living with ghosts who occasionally made noise and left physical traces but never truly acknowledged you. Then there was the issue of my garden. My roses, especially the blush pink Eden climbers, were my pride and joy. I spent hours tending to them, nurturing each bud, carefully pruning every branch. Their fragrance, a sweet, powdery perfume, always filled the air around the porch in late spring. One afternoon around 3:00 p.m., I looked out from the kitchen window, expecting to see the gentle sway of their petals in the breeze. Instead, I saw my grandniece, Clara, 15 years old, laughing raucously with her friends. They were gathered on the lawn, and Clara had carelessly tossed her bright blue backpack right onto the delicate stems of my iceberg roses, flattening them against the damp soil. Her friends, 3 of them, were just as oblivious, stepping on the tender new growth of the hostas I had just planted, their heavy sneakers grinding the leaves into the earth. My heart sank with a dull thud, a physical ache spreading through my chest. I felt a flush of heat rise to my cheeks, a familiar sting behind my eyes. I walked outside, the screen door hissing softly as it closed behind me. "Clara," I called out, my voice betraying the tremor of hurt I felt. "Please, darling, be careful, you're stepping on my flowers." She turned, her laughter dissolving into a blank stare. Her eyes, usually so lively, held a flicker of something I couldn't quite place, perhaps irritation, perhaps just profound disinterest. "Oh, Aunt Me," she drawled, her voice thick with a teenager's casual dismissal. "They're just plants. They'll grow back." She didn't move her backpack. Her friends chuckled, a low, collective sound that grated on my nerves. The sight of the crushed rose petals, still vibrant pink but irrevocably bruised, made my stomach clench. It was a small thing, really, just a few plants. But it was the casual cruelty, the utter lack of care, that cut deepest. It felt like she was stepping not just on the roses, but on a piece of my heart. The air itself seemed to thicken with her indifference, pressing down on me, making each breath feel heavier. The sweet scent of the undamaged roses suddenly seemed poignant, a cruel reminder of the beauty that was being trampled. I could feel the sun warm on my skin, but inside, a chill had taken root. These weren't isolated incidents. They became part of the daily tapestry, threads of disregard woven into the fabric of our lives. My grandnephew, Leo, 19 years old, had a habit of leaving his dirty dishes on the coffee table in the living room for days. I would come down around 6:00 a.m., ready for my morning routine, only to find crusty remnants of cereal stuck to bowls, or empty soda cans sticky with dried syrup, attracting tiny, almost invisible ants that marched in neat lines towards the sugary residue. The sight made my skin crawl. I'd gently ask him, "Leo, dear, could you please take your dishes to the sink?" He'd nod vaguely, his eyes already drifting back to the television screen, or he'd mumble a "yeah, sure" in a minute, which stretched into hours, sometimes a full 24 hours. The dirty dishes would sit there, a silent accusation, a testament to my unheeded requests. Eventually, I would wash them myself, the warm water running over my hands, the suds smelling faintly of lemon, trying to wash away not just the food particles, but also the bitterness that had begun to pool in my own heart. Each time I scrubbed a bowl he had left, it felt like I was scrubbing away a piece of my own peace. The most galling incidents, though, were often financial. My pension, though modest, was enough for me to live comfortably and maintain my home. I had saved diligently for 45 years, working hard as a school librarian, seeing generations of children pass through my quiet, book-filled sanctuary. I was never lavish, always practical, preferring the simple joys of a good book, a well-tended garden, and a warm cup of tea. But my grandchildren, particularly my granddaughter Sarah, 21 years old, seemed to view my savings as an endless wellspring. "Aunt Me," she'd begin, her voice sweet and a little breathless, often around 8:00 p.m. when she knew I was settled with my evening tea and a crossword puzzle. "I really need some money for rent. It's due on the 1st of the month and I'm short $500 this time." Or, "My car needs new tires, it's going to be $300. I promise I'll pay you back next week." The promises, like wisps of smoke, would vanish into thin air. I kept a small ledger, a neat little spiral-bound book, where I meticulously recorded every amount, every date. After 2 years, the total was over $3,000. Not once had a single dollar been returned. Each time I gave her money, a small part of me felt a cold dread, knowing it was likely gone forever. My stomach would tighten into a hard knot, a familiar ache. The crisp feel of the banknotes in my hand would feel heavy, not with their value, but with the weight of her unspoken expectation and my own growing resentment. One evening, I decided to finally speak up. It was a Tuesday, late in October, around 7:00 p.m. The air outside was turning sharp, carrying the scent of damp leaves. Sarah was once again asking for $200 for a textbook. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was likely for a new pair of designer jeans she'd mentioned earlier. I held the $200 in my hand, the crinkle of the bills loud in the quiet kitchen. "Sarah," I said, my voice wavering slightly despite my best efforts to keep it firm, I've been looking through my records. You owe me over $3,000 now. I can't keep giving you money without any of it coming back." She stared at me, her eyes wide, a flicker of genuine shock on her face, quickly replaced by a stony, almost hostile expression. The kitchen lights, usually so warm and inviting, seemed to cast a harsh glow on her face, highlighting the sudden tautness of her jaw. The faint aroma of the cinnamon rolls I had baked earlier for dessert seemed to vanish, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of tension. The hum of the fluorescent light above the stove felt amplified, a buzzing in my ears. The silence that followed was not the peaceful kind. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. It stretched for what felt like an eternity, perhaps 10 long seconds, punctuated only by the distant tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. Her gaze, usually so soft when asking for favors, was now hard, unyielding. It was the look of someone who felt entitled, caught off guard, and now deeply offended. "Aunt Me," she finally said, her voice dripping with an icy accusation I had never heard directed at me before. "It's just family, you have plenty. What are you going to do with it all anyway? You don't have anyone else." The words struck me like physical blows. My breath hitched. My throat felt instantly dry, raw. "What are you going to do with it all anyway? You don't have anyone else." The phrase echoed in the suddenly cavernous space of my mind, reverberating with an unbearable sting. It was a cruel reminder of my solitary state, a callous dismissal of my worth beyond my financial resources. It was not just about the money. It was about the crushing realization that my generosity was seen not as an act of love, but as an obligation, and my existence was valued only for what I could provide. My hands, still clutching the $200, began to tremble. I felt a cold wave wash over me, leaving me feeling hollowed out, as if all the warmth had been drained from my body. The small, familiar kitchen suddenly felt vast and empty. I remember thinking about that silence afterward. It wasn't an absence of sound, not truly. It was a presence of unspoken things. The air would thicken, growing heavy and still, pressing down on my chest until it felt tight and constricted. The usual soft sounds of the house, the gentle whir of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of a car on the street, the faint whisper of the wind against the window panes would recede, muffled by this oppressive quiet. It was a silence that buzzed with unspoken words, with raw emotions held just beneath the surface, threatening to burst forth but always held captive by a taut, brittle tension. You could almost taste it, a metallic, bitter tang in the back of your throat. It felt like walking through treacle, every movement deliberate, every breath shallow. The silence stretched, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours, filling every nook and cranny of the house, leaving no space for warmth or light. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a chilling narrative of distance, disregard, and the slow erosion of connection. In those moments, even the dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight seemed to move with a reluctant, heavy grace, caught in the stillness of unspoken hurt. The silence wasn't empty. It was full to bursting with things unsaid, with the weight of expectations unmet and the growing chasm between generations. It was a physical thing, a heavy cloak that wrapped around me, making me feel utterly alone, even when my house was supposedly full. After Sarah's biting comment, I found myself retreating further into myself. My morning routine, once a cheerful start to the day, became a quiet, almost clandestine operation. I would rise at 5:00 a.m., long before anyone else stirred, make my coffee, and read my book in the small sunroom, the only place where I truly felt peace. I started locking my bedroom door at night, a habit I had never had in 75 years of living. It felt wrong, like I was admitting defeat, but a deep, primal need for self-preservation had begun to assert itself. The incidents continued to pile up, each one a tiny chip taken from the sturdy foundation of my patience. Thomas, my grandnephew who loved video games, would leave the front door unlocked, even after I had asked him, for perhaps the 10th time, to please lock it behind him, especially after 9:00 p.m. "Aunt Me, nobody's going to come in," he'd casually dismiss, as if my concern for safety was just an old woman's irrational fear. One chilly evening, around 10:30 p.m., I went to check the locks before bed, a habit ingrained from years of living alone. The front door was ajar, a sliver of cold night air seeping into the warm hallway, carrying with it the damp smell of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. My heart leaped into my throat. The thought of someone simply walking in, uninvited, into my home, my sanctuary, sent a shiver of pure dread down my spine. The heavy brass knob felt cold beneath my fingers as I twisted it, hearing the satisfying click of the lock engaging. It wasn't just about safety. It was about a profound lack of respect for my boundaries, for my peace of mind. Clara, the grandniece who trampled my roses, began to invite her friends over without asking, sometimes 4 or 5 of them, descending upon my home like a small, boisterous army. They would blast music from her room, the heavy bass thumping through the floorboards, vibrating through the delicate porcelain figurines on my mantelpiece. The smell of cheap perfume and fast food would cling to the air long after they left. I loved having young people around, I truly did, but this was different. This wasn't visiting, this was an invasion. One Saturday afternoon around 2:00 p.m., I was trying to read in the living room, a rare moment of quiet. Suddenly, a shrieking laugh erupted from Clara's room upstairs, followed by a loud crash. I jumped, my heart pounding against my ribs. I hurried upstairs, my knees aching with each step. The door to Clara's room was wide open, and the sight that met me made my blood run cold. One of her friends, a tall girl with bright pink hair, was standing on my antique rocking chair, the one my grandfather had carved for my grandmother, trying to reach a poster to stick on the wall. The chair groaned under her weight, its delicate wood visibly straining. "Stop!" I cried out, my voice sharper than I intended, a raw edge of panic in it. "Get down from there immediately." The girl, startled, lost her footing, scrambling off the chair. She looked at me, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and defiance. Clara just rolled her eyes, a familiar gesture that spoke volumes. "Aunt Me, it's fine," she sighed, as if I were the one making a fuss over nothing. "It's just a chair. Just a chair." To them, perhaps. To me, it was a piece of history, a silent witness to generations of my family's stories, a tangible link to my past. The wood, when I gently ran my hand over it, felt rougher in places, tiny new splinters marring its smooth surface. The scent of old wood and polish, once comforting, now seemed to carry a faint echo of distress. My hands trembled as I carefully checked the joints, a fresh wave of hurt washing over me. Leo, my grandnephew, the one with the dirty dishes, started to make comments about my cooking. I had always prided myself on my cooking, simple but wholesome meals, full of fresh vegetables from my garden and recipes passed down through generations. I would spend hours in the kitchen, carefully dicing vegetables, simmering sauces, the warm, comforting aromas filling the house. One Sunday around 1:00 p.m., I had prepared my famous pot roast, slow-cooked for 5 hours, the meat so tender it fell apart with a fork, surrounded by roasted potatoes and carrots. I placed the steaming platter on the dining table, the rich, savory smell making my mouth water. Leo took a mouthful, chewed thoughtfully, and then with a dramatic sigh pushed his plate away. "Aunt Me," he announced to the table, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "this is really bland. Don't you use any seasoning, tastes like cardboard." A profound silence descended upon the table. My daughter, Eleanor, his mother, shot him a look that could curdle milk, but she said nothing. My chest tightened, a sharp, sudden pain that stole my breath. I had spent all morning in that hot kitchen, stirring and tasting, trying to create a meal that would bring us together. And in 2 short sentences, he had dismissed it, dismissed my effort, dismissed me. My appetite vanished, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth, far more potent than any seasoning could have made. The vibrant colors of the roast and vegetables, once so appealing, now seemed dull and unappetizing. I picked at my food, the warmth of the plate feeling alien in my cold hands. His comment, though aimed at my cooking, felt like an arrow piercing my very core, an attack on my ability to care, to nurture, to provide. The culmination of this slow, agonizing erosion of respect came one Friday evening around 6:00 p.m. I had decided to host a small family dinner. Eleanor, my daughter, and her husband, Robert, were coming along with Thomas, Clara, Leo, and Sarah. I had spent all day preparing, cleaning the house until it gleamed, setting the table with my best china, the one with the delicate blue floral pattern that only came out on special occasions. I even baked a double chocolate cake, knowing it was Clara's favorite. The house was filled with the delicious scent of roasted chicken, thyme, and baking chocolate. Everyone arrived, a flurry of coats and chatter. We sat down at the dining table, the soft glow of the overhead chandelier casting a warm light. I felt a flicker of hope, a desperate wish that tonight, just tonight, things might be different, that we could simply enjoy each other's company, share stories, and laugh. But that hope was quickly extinguished. As I was serving the chicken, carefully placing a golden brown piece onto each plate, Sarah reached across the table, not for a serving dish but for her phone. A loud ringtone, a jarring pop song, blared through the quiet dining room. She answered it immediately, holding it to her ear, oblivious to the fact that she had just interrupted the start of dinner, or that she was speaking loudly over my soft voice as I offered seconds. "Yeah, no, I'm at Aunt Me's," she said, her voice carrying easily. "It's like super boring. My aunt made chicken again. I know, right? So basic. I just want to leave and go to the mall. Can you pick me up in 30 minutes? The words, clear and sharp, hung in the air. The clinking of forks against china stopped. The gentle hum of conversation died. Every eye at the table except Sarah's was on me. My hands, holding the serving tongs, froze midway to Leo's plate. The warmth of the chicken in the platter seemed to radiate a sudden chill. My face flushed crimson, a wave of heat washing over me, followed by an icy coldness that seeped into my bones. My eyes prickled with tears, tears that threatened to spill but were held back by a fierce, almost desperate pride. So basic. Super boring. The phrases echoed in my mind, each syllable a fresh wound. It wasn't just the words. It was the casualness of their delivery, the public dismissal, the utter lack of regard for my feelings, my efforts, my home. It was as if I wasn't even there, a transparent figure in my own dining room, serving a meal that was deemed unworthy, a presence to be endured, not cherished. The air in the room became impossibly thick, suffocating. I could feel Elinor's horrified gaze, Robert's uncomfortable shift in his seat, Thomas and Leo looking down at their plates, suddenly engrossed in their food. Clara, meanwhile, was trying to stifle a giggle, her hand clamped over her mouth. The silence that followed Sarah's phone call was deafening, pressing in on me from all sides. It wasn't just the lack of sound. It was the sheer weight of her words, hanging in the air like a noxious cloud, poisoning the very atmosphere of the room. The tantalizing aroma of the roast chicken, which had filled the house with such promise, now seemed to mock me, its warmth and richness a stark contrast to the cold desolation in my heart. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably, making the serving tongs clatter slightly against the ceramic platter. I felt an overwhelming urge to simply drop everything and flee, to escape the crushing humiliation that had enveloped me. I looked at Sarah, who, having finished her call, had finally looked up, a slight, expectant smirk on her face, as if she were waiting for me to react, or perhaps just to continue serving her basic chicken. Her eyes, usually so calculating when she needed something, now held a glint of triumph, a perverse satisfaction in having asserted her disdain so openly. In that moment, something inside me, something deep and resilient that had been slowly cracking under the constant pressure, finally broke. A dam that had held back years of hurt, disappointment, and unacknowledged love gave way. The tears that had been threatening to fall now welled up, hot and stinging, blurring the delicate blue patterns on my china plates. My vision swam, and the faces of my family, once so beloved, became indistinct blurs of color. My chest ached with a pain so profound it stole my breath, a physical manifestation of a spirit wounded to its core. The fork, with its golden brown piece of chicken, fell with a soft thud onto Leo's plate, rattling the china. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle over me, displacing the raw, burning humiliation. It was a clarity born of exhaustion, a quiet certainty forged in the crucible of repeated disrespect. The air, which had felt so heavy moments before, now seemed to crackle with an unspoken truth. The familiar scent of home, once a comfort, now felt like a cage, filled with the ghosts of ignored requests, dismissed feelings, and trampled affections. This was not the life I had built. This was not the family I had nurtured. The silent tears traced hot paths down my cheeks, but they were no longer tears of sadness, but of a quiet, fierce determination. My gaze, which had been downcast, slowly lifted, meeting Sarah's eyes across the table. The silence continued, but this time it was different. This silence was not oppressive. It was pregnant with possibility, a new, unforeseen chapter waiting to unfold. My voice, when it came, was soft, almost a whisper, but it resonated with a strength I hadn't felt in years.